There are moments in sport that stop time. Not the walk-off home runs. Not the championship celebrations. Not the record-breaking performances that get replayed on highlight reels for decades. Those moments are expected to be unforgettable, they are built for it, surrounded by cameras and commentary and the full apparatus of sporting spectacle. The moments that truly stop time are the ones nobody planned for. The ones that happen in the space between the final out and the locker room. In the corridor between the dugout and the tunnel. In the charged, unscripted seconds after a game has ended and the professional masks that players wear in public have not yet been fully reassembled. Japan had just lost 5-8. The scoreboard was final. The defeat was real. And in that raw, unguarded moment, with teammates still processing the result, with coaches exchanging quiet words, with the entire weight of a loss pressing down on everyone wearing that uniform, Munetaka Murakami did something that nobody in that stadium, nobody watching from home, and nobody in the entire baseball world was prepared for. He pointed his finger directly at Shohei Ohtani's face. And then he laughed. Not a private laugh. Not a whispered exchange between two players that could later be explained away as friendly banter or locker room humor. In front of everyone. Publicly. Deliberately. With full awareness of exactly what he was doing and exactly who he was doing it to. The silence that followed lasted approximately 2 seconds. What came after that silence is still echoing across the entire baseball world. Before anything else, before the suspension, before Yoshida's intervention, before NPB's historic punishment, it is essential to understand the full weight of what Murakami did in that moment. This was not a heated argument between two players of equal standing in a tense competitive situation. This was not two teammates clashing over strategy or accountability in the immediate aftermath of a difficult loss. Those things happen in professional sports. They are understood. They are processed internally and rarely reach the level of public scandal. What Murakami did was something categorically different. He chose, in a moment of maximum visibility, to direct a gesture of open mockery at the most respected player in Japanese baseball history. A player whose reputation, built not just on his statistics but on his character, his discipline, his consistent treatment of everyone around him with dignity, is inseparable from what Japanese baseball means to the world. Pointing a finger at someone's face is not ambiguous body language. In Japanese culture specifically, where public humiliation carries a social weight that extends far beyond the immediate moment, the gesture was immediately understood by everyone who witnessed it for exactly what it was. A deliberate act of disrespect. A choice to diminish. A public statement, made without words, that was louder than anything Murakami could have said through a microphone. The laugh made it worse. Because the laugh removed any possibility of misinterpretation. This was not a nervous reaction. This was not an emotional outburst that could be attributed to the stress of the loss. The laugh was controlled. Conscious. Directed. It said, clearly and unmistakably, that Murakami knew precisely what he was doing and felt comfortable enough to do it openly. That comfort, that assumption that this behavior would be tolerated, is what truly alarmed the people watching. The public gesture lasted only seconds. What followed lasted considerably longer. Sources close to the Japan national team described the atmosphere in the immediate aftermath as one of stunned disbelief. Players who had been processing the loss in their own private ways suddenly found themselves witnesses to something that had nothing to do with the score. Coaches who had been preparing to address the team's performance found themselves instead managing a situation that had no script. And then Yoshida moved. Masataka Yoshida, outfielder, teammate, and one of the most respected presences in that locker room, did not wait for coaches to intervene. Did not wait for a team official to step between the two players. Did not calculate the professional risk of inserting himself into a confrontation involving two of Japan's highest-profile baseball names. He grabbed Murakami by the collar. Not metaphorically. Not as a figure of speech for a tense exchange of words. Physically. Directly. With the full, clear intention of making Murakami understand, in terms that could not be misread, that what he had just done was not going to pass without consequence. The demand was immediate and specific: apologize to Ohtani. Not tomorrow. Not in a carefully worded public statement drafted by a PR team. Not in a private message sent through an intermediary. Here. Now. In front of the same people who had witnessed the original gesture. A public disrespect required a public correction. Witnesses describe Yoshida's intervention as the moment the room fully understood the severity of what had just occurred. Until that point, there was still the possibility, however slim, that the situation might be contained, explained, quietly resolved. Yoshida's action removed that possibility entirely. This was not going to be quietly resolved. The speed of the institutional response was remarkable. Before NPB had formally convened to discuss the incident. Before the full details had been reported across every major Japanese sports outlet. Before the public conversation had reached its peak intensity, the Chicago White Sox had already made their decision. Murakami was suspended. 3 years. The length of that suspension requires a moment of genuine reflection, because it is not a number that gets attached to disciplinary decisions lightly. 3 years in professional baseball is not a cooling-off period. It is not a stern warning delivered in the language of formal punishment. 3 years is a career-altering consequence. For a player at Murakami's age and stage of development, 3 years of suspension does not simply pause a career, it fundamentally reshapes what that career will become. The White Sox statement was direct and unambiguous in its reasoning. The organization cited conduct unbecoming of a professional athlete. They cited the public nature of the incident and the specific identity of the player targeted. They cited the message that tolerating such behavior, even passively, even with no formal response, would send to every player in their system and every player watching from outside it. The message the suspension sent instead was equally clear: there is no version of this story in which what Murakami did is acceptable, and there is no level of baseball talent that provides immunity from the consequences of choosing to publicly humiliate a teammate of Ohtani's standing. 3 years. Effective immediately. If the White Sox suspension was a shock, what NPB announced next was something the Japanese baseball world had genuinely never seen before. The league's response was described by multiple senior journalists covering NPB as the most severe disciplinary action the organization had taken in its modern history. The language used in the official announcement was formal and measured in the way that institutional language always is, but the substance of what was being communicated was anything but measured. NPB was not simply punishing a player for a locker room incident. NPB was making a statement about standards. About what Japanese baseball represents. About the values that the Samurai Japan program is built on and the expectation that every player who wears that uniform, regardless of their individual talent or reputation, upholds those values completely. The specific details of NPB's punishment extended beyond the suspension itself. Murakami would be required to complete a formal process of accountability before any reinstatement could be considered. The process was designed not as a bureaucratic formality but as a genuine reckoning, one that required Murakami to demonstrate, through sustained behavior over a meaningful period of time, that he understood the gravity of what he had done and had genuinely changed. Former NPB officials speaking to the media in the hours after the announcement expressed a mixture of reactions. Some felt the punishment was exactly proportionate, that the unprecedented nature of the incident demanded an unprecedented response and that anything less would have sent the wrong message. Others questioned whether the severity of the institutional response might ultimately complicate Murakami's path back to the level of performance he had shown before this moment. But the overwhelming consensus was simple: NPB had no other choice. Through all of it, the gesture, the laugh, Yoshida's intervention, the White Sox suspension, the NPB announcement, Ohtani said nothing publicly. This will surprise no one who has followed him closely. Ohtani's public silence in moments of personal controversy is not passivity. It is not weakness. It is not the silence of someone who doesn't have words or doesn't feel the weight of what happened. It is a deliberate, consistent expression of a personal philosophy that has defined his entire career. He does not give energy to things that do not deserve his energy. The people who know Ohtani, who have trained with him, eaten with him, shared locker rooms and dugouts and national team cafeterias with him, describe a person whose emotional foundation is genuinely difficult to shake. Not because he doesn't feel things deeply, but because he has built, over years of deliberate practice, an inner discipline that matches his physical one. The same person who has eaten the same nutritionally calibrated meals since high school. The same person who treats every day of preparation with identical seriousness, whether it is spring training or the final game of a championship. The same person who, at the WBC, listened to younger players with the same patience he brought to his conversations with veterans. That person does not respond to a pointed finger and a laugh by lowering himself to the same level. He lets the institution speak. He lets his teammates speak, and Yoshida spoke loudly enough for both of them. He returns to his routine, and he lets the quality of what he does every single day answer every question that needs answering. It is, in its own way, the most powerful response available to him. And everyone in baseball knows it. Here is what the coverage of this incident has largely avoided confronting directly. Murakami is an extraordinarily talented baseball player. His numbers speak for themselves. His potential, before this moment, was the subject of genuine excitement across Japanese baseball and in MLB front offices that had been tracking his development for years. None of that talent disappeared when he pointed his finger and laughed. But talent, this incident reminds us, is only one part of the equation. The other part, the part that Ohtani has spent his entire career demonstrating with every meal, every training session, every quiet interaction with a younger player who needed guidance, is character. Character is not something that shows up in your batting average. It shows up in the 2 seconds after a 5-8 loss when nobody has told you how to behave and nobody is holding you accountable and you make a choice about what kind of person you are going to be in this moment. Murakami made his choice. The suspension is not the punishment. The suspension is simply the formal acknowledgement of what the choice revealed. The real consequence is something that no reinstatement process can fully reverse, the permanent entry of this moment into the record of who Munetaka Murakami chose to be on the day it mattered most to choose correctly. 3 years. That number will hang over everything Murakami does from this point forward. Every interview. Every spring training. Every game he plays if and when he returns to the field. The question of what he does with that time, whether he uses it for genuine reflection and transformation, or simply waits it out as an obstacle between himself and the career he wants, will define him more completely than any home run total ever could. Yoshida grabbed him by the collar and demanded an apology. NPB demanded accountability through the most severe punishment in its modern history. The White Sox demanded professionalism through an immediate 3-year suspension. And Ohtani, through his silence, through his routine, through the daily standard he set simply by being who he has always been, demands something even harder. He demands that everyone around him be worthy of the game they are playing. Murakami has 3 years to decide if he is. Baseball does not forget moments like this. The scoreboard from that 5-8 loss will be forgotten long before the image of that pointed finger disappears from the memory of everyone who saw it.